Welcome back, everyone. I wanted to end this course with a pretty advanced action set of Bard that is not technically officially announced yet, and it's executing code with Bard. So what does this actually mean? Well, in June of 2023, Google announced that Bard has the capability to perform what is officially known as implicit code execution, meaning that Bard will automatically both generate and execute code for certain prompts. For example, let's imagine I asked Bard to perform a complex math operation that wouldn't really be solvable just by predicting the next most likely piece of text. Well, in that case, it's going to create Python code and execute it on the Google Cloud Platform in the background. So we can actually leverage this in what I will call explicit code generation by asking Bard to execute the code directly. So a quick important note on this. This capability is not technically officially supported or even announced by the Bard team. The only source official from Google that I could find on this is a single blog post called Bard is Getting Better at Logic and Reasoning, where it discusses implicit code execution in a general sense. I have actually not seen any official documentation from Google about Gemini and Bard being able to just receive Python code and execute it in the background. But I'm going to show you right now that it actually does this and it is possible. In fact, we saw a quick example of that in the coding hallucination lecture. So let me explain the implicit code execution that is officially announced by Bard and Google in that keyword blog post, and then I'll show you what I call explicit code execution, where you provide it some code and it's going to run it. So let's head over to Bard. Okay, so here I am in Bard. First, I want to, again, reiterate that this isn't really officially mentioned inside of Google Bards and their blog posts. If you check out a blog post called Bard is Getting Better at Logic and Reasoning, it will talk about this idea of what they call implicit code execution and give you a few examples of what they call, system one versus system two thinking and allowing code to be run in the background. So what does this actually look like? You can imagine that I want to perform a simple calculation, or really not that simple for a large language model, such as this large number multiplied by this large number. Now, I could use a calculator and then see the correct result here. What happens if I actually ask Bard, in plain language, what this result is? Well, in a new chat, I'm going to say, what is, and I'll paste this, and even I'll remove the asterisk there, and I'll say times, just to really make it like natural language. So I'll say, what is this number times this number? Hit submit. And so what's happening right now is Bard is reading this, transforming it into Python code, then executing that Python code. And then when it gets the result, it gives it back to the Gemini model and then says, here's the question, here's the Python code, here's the result. Please present this information in a way that is useful back to the user. And you can see here, it actually did give me the correct answer. Let's double check that. So I'll copy this and make sure it matches. And you can see it does in fact match. So this is the kind of thing where it didn't want to just hallucinate an answer that looked correct. Instead, it actually performed and executed Python code in the background. That is what is known as that implicit code execution. So what about explicit code execution? Is that actually possible with Bard? I'm going to show you that it is, but keep in mind, it's not going to work every single time, and it's not going to be able to do it for any package. And it is not technically an officially supported part of Bard, but you should expect it to happen in the future. This is kind of like its version of the code interpreter. But I do want to show you the power of it. So I'm going to say here, let's go to the PyPlot tutorial, and I'm going to copy this simple piece of code that should execute and produce this graph. And then I'm going to inform Bard to execute this code, colon, and then I'm going to paste in that code. Let's go ahead and run it and see if it can figure out that it's going to grab that Python code and execute it in the background. And you can see here, it actually has the code. And notice it even gave it to me in an interactive format with the X and Y coordinates. So some things to keep in mind is that you should be able to see the code that it executed, just so you can check against the code you provided versus the code executed. The other thing to keep in mind is not every package is going to be available. So if you're using some really esoteric Python package, and again, I would stick to Python for this particular sort of explicit code execution. But if you're dealing with a really esoteric package, it may not be able to do it. And if you're referencing files that it's not able to access, it will give you errors. Again, this is not technically an officially supported part of Google's Bard, but you can expect it to be officially supported and announced in the future because it's technically already doing it on the back end. You can see it worked for us. There just haven't been any sort of official blog post announcements, at least at the time of this filming, that it's able to execute the code that you provide rather than the code that it generates internally. But this is a very powerful tool. I would encourage you to play around with it, see how you can prompt. And the only thing to keep in mind is don't expect this to work 100 out of 100 times right out of the gate. You may need to simplify your prompts, maybe get rid of some packages, and there are going to be computation limits. You can't do something like, execute this code for an hour and mine some Bitcoin. It's just intended for kind of quick experimental prompts for executing code. Okay, hope that was helpful. Thanks, everyone.